Live show number 419, August 18th. Yes. It has been that kind of week, and I'm sure many of you, it's the same thing. We are in budget season. Should have like party confetti or something, at least for the hospitality industry, which is, I don't know, it's mixed blessings. I used to despise budget season because of all the time consumable outside of the normal daily routine of running the hotel, and getting everybody in and out of the requirements and the constant communication between corporate and ownership if they were a third party that was actively involved in the budgeting process. It just made for a very dynamic few months. It made it difficult if people had to step out. Vacations were hard to authorize because of the need to have people available for what we were doing and so forth, and the constant discussion. And then I turned, kind of like Doctor Strange loves How I Learned to Love the Bomb thing. Then I started embracing it because it was a chance to really look at what we thought the hotel was doing. And I began to see it as an opportunity to speak to ownership and corporate in a very real way, their artificial expectations or their implied expectations or their unrealistic expectations, or sometimes just a very good collaboration with them about what really truly to genuinely expect. And that brought in some really cool dialogue. It gave me the chance to really see how we can perform better, or what made us perform so well up to year to date in comparison to what we thought a year ago. It was a good self-evaluative time to take, and so I began to really enjoy the budget season, as much as you enjoy that kind of increased workload, right? To the process of finding better ways to make it run better and finding better ways to answer questions that I couldn't answer the year before. I saw it as a challenge of opportunity. Um, I got very good at figuring out ways to best present so that I could get what I needed without it being a three-way circle of discontent as to why I was asking for money for certain things. Like if I needed new FF&E products or new HVAC stuff or new marketing material, whatever it was. So that was the instigation of my idea for today's topic of the show. And that is calculating potential growth with actual data. We're in that time of year, as I said, budget season, where we have to evaluate what we're looking at next year. Now, I have watched many of my clients have a tale of three worlds. The first world is the reality of their actuals. This is what we're able to produce day in, day out. This is our revenue strategies at a granular level of by day, by inventory type, by yieldability, by competitive set. And for anybody that works the property space, you know what I'm talking about. It's that persistent evaluative process. Where are we in position to the market? Where is our current pace and demand? Where is our competitors in comparison to us? What is this Friday going to look like in comparison to what we were banking on? What variations are coming up? How's the group booking rate for things that are coming forward? How is our window of 30 days versus the 60? How are we going to end the quarter for bonuses? These are real world things that happen on a daily basis for property levels at exec levels. Is that constant evaluative perspective. A lot of it, unfortunately, can be based on opinion. I'm going to butcher this quote, but the idea of it is what I hope to get across, and that is science isn't based on opinion. Science is based on data. So you can never disagree with science, because science will disagree with itself when it finds new data that changes what it first thought to what it now thinks. It's really just a actualization of a reality of the new data. Anything else, religion, anything like that, is based on opinion. It's not based on facts. It's based on opinions, based on emotions, beliefs, and so forth. And opinions, if you find yourself running into the world of expressing an opinion over data, then you've gone past the line of science. I know I butchered the quote, but the idea holds true with our budgeting process. There is the discussions that are based on numbers. And the numbers I'm talking about is actualizations per day. Those are real numbers. That happened yesterday. That was our bookings. That was our inventory. That was our occupancy. That was our rates, our costs. Those are actualized. Then you have the second world, which is forecast. This is what we plan for with more actualized data looking forward. And that should be very high level accuracy. I mean, we always shot for when I went through Hilton's revenue management school back when it was Beverly Hill days, where pass or fail was your way of staying in the class. There's a lot of pressure to be in there. It was really fun. It was almost back in the slide rule days, and I kid you not. You, you were always shooting for as good as 4% accuracy within a given 30-day roll. That I think can actually be brought down with the fact that we're able to aggregate data faster, analyze data quicker, have trend analysis and algorithms that work for our benefit rather than our mental capacities of mathematics. And for that reason, I believe we could get that even lower on a 30-day roll. You should be almost 100% accurate within 7 days. Let's say that 99% at least, minus any unforeseen variances that just couldn't be accounted for. So you have this forecasting data that should be very close to what your actualization is actually rolling into. Actualization, actually. Wow. How many times can I use that word? The third world we live in is the mystical world of budgets. And budgets are created out of opinion. I'm sorry to say, I do not believe they're based on actual factual information. And why do I say this? Is because the influences that are on budget creation are beyond the calculation of actual data. They're on implied mathematics. And I've told you before, anybody that's implying mathematics, unfortunately, isn't really applying it to real data, because they're implying that this number represents something. Ownership is notorious for implied mathematics. They think that if it says 2% growth, they think it's probably likely that you can get 4% growth. Just push the gas pedal down harder. Do something, pump up the tires more. Maybe we'll get some more speed out of her. And yes, there is always that variance. And unfortunately, it happens enough that it validates the ownership's perspective that if they ask for more, they'll get more. Let's put the carrot for the bonuses on a longer stick. That way they'll try harder. That doesn't always work, and it actually recoils in a bad way if you put the stick too long. And we've had that discussion on the live show many times before as well. So with it, you have this fabrication, okay, of what they want in numbers. Now, sometimes it's financially based. And what I mean by that is that they are looking to hit a goal for financial verification of investors, co-investors with them, banks that they carry notes for them for, potential growth opportunities to show that they are capable of expanding a business. So other businesses that they're looking to pursue and expand into their portfolio are warranted, an assurance level that their finances are forward thinking, they're positive growth. Those numbers help in the decision models for people funding monies or banks approving loans. And so they create numbers under the auspices that these numbers could be hit, and then assign this down to their management teams, their management company, and or the properties directly and combinations thereof to facilitate the creation of these numbers. And a lot of times what that means is that the dime will fall always to one side of the probability thing. If you're close enough, then let's throw it up. Round up, so to speak. Let's round up, especially when it comes to revenue numbers. And when it comes to cost numbers, round down to show margins of growth and net revenues and so forth. And that mystical third world of budgets starts with some numbers, but it's not based on all numbers. It's a motivation in some ways. It's a functional tool, kind of how you create star report comp sets or things. You sometimes make comp sets to make you look good in the reporting, so you can do the same reason that budgets are created for positive. You show that they're dominating your market space, when in fact that's not your direct competitors, and you're comparing yourself to people that you can shine better for, so that you shine better for people that you're asking for things like finances and so forth from. So these three worlds exist: budget, forecast, actuals. Actuals, hard data. What's in the books yesterday, minus the closing of the books, where credits and issues and so forth go on, are actuals. Let's put within 72 hours they turn hard. Forecasts should be very, very close to that, having been, and in the sense of within fractions of being close to what the actuals are. And as I mentioned earlier, my clients, I see wonderful growth year over year for some of my clients and the numbers that they run. And I'm going to relate to brand hotels that I'm talking about, because independent hotels are a little bit more flexible with their interpretation of revenues on actual numbers. Some, not all. Caveat there. The numbers of actuals are better year over year, month over month, for the most part, this whole year. Their forecasts not far behind and thereabouts. It depends on the rigidity of how they can modify forecasts and what opportunities they have for modifying the forecasts as they land. Obviously, if you can change your forecast the day before the actuals happen, you're going to be always accurate. But budgets, they're way behind persistently because the number was artificially too high. And what this does is creates a lot of problems in the sense of people's bonuses, motivation. I mean, if you're constantly running a car at red line, eventually something's going to break. And in the world of running your team too hard, and we already know about labor issues, bandwidth capabilities inside the hotels, the cost saving measures that are extreme to yield better net revenues, make up for lost gains from our times during the lockdown and so forth. We're stretching past the boundaries of actual feasibility for a lot of businesses. Very few businesses have truly been able to invest back into their infrastructure as much as they should. And also, even if they find good people, if they burn them too hard, they're going to leave and go to someplace else that they don't get burned so hard. So there's a lot of metrics that are going on that budgets now have a higher influence on than they had before. Budgets used to be a number that was shared between exec committees and ownerships and management companies. And very little did ever that discussion make it into the general populace of a property. Excuse me, coffee's good. Nowadays, budgets is a constant context of conversation with everybody. It's used as an excuse, it's used as a whipping stick, it's used as a means of motivation, and also as a means of criticism. Very few times am I seeing it used as a reward system. It's artificially too high because people that are rich want to get richer, and they are looking to continue their growth profits and to make up for lost profits from previous years, as we mentioned. Not all companies do this. Really great companies don't. Real great companies are ones that are very realistic and based their budgeting on real data. And that, in a very long 10-minute prelude, is where we are with our topic today. Our topic is about calculating potential growth with actual data. Now, there's two levels of data that we can talk about, and three levels of people to talk to. Hey, let's make it math even. Okay, so the three levels of people we talk to are the property level people, day in and day out grinders, the management team, corporate level, also day in day out grinders, but they have an overview of multiple units and so forth, and then ownership, vested particular interest in the owner's participation that they have. And as such, they all look for different data. Example, property level data, very granular about how did we close last night? What was our final ADR for yesterday? We were shooting for X. Did we get X or X minus 1, X plus 1? Where did we land? Occupancy, we were hitting for Y. Did we get Y plus, Y minus? What was our final walk-in count? And of course, from the exec side, total operational expense. We know it's not measured per day, so I wouldn't say that they're looking at yesterday's numbers, but if it made it into the night auditor's log that there was a massive water leak somewhere, there's an anticipation it's probably going to be a decent water bill and a repair bill attached to it. So that's that data. They're looking at those numbers. And how did it land against our forecast that we're talking about? And how did our competitors land? How did they fare from what we thought they were doing to what they ended up doing? That doesn't come as readily, but that data is there. The second level of data, aggregate view. How are we looking at pace? How are we looking month to date? How are we looking at quarter to date, year to date? How are we looking at channel contribution? Where's our revenue coming from? Where's our costs outflowing from? That's the corporate and management level discussions that happen at that level. They're looking for data that's related to that. And ownership data is looking at, am I making money or not making money? I know it sounds simplistic. There's a lot more to it, but let's just keep it simple for them. They like red, bad, green, good. Arrow up, good. Arrow bad, down. They just need a marker in most senses. And some owners want more than that, but most generally owners just want to make sure that their monies that they invested in are doing what they wanted them to do. So you have these three levels of demand of data interest. We have two levels of data that are available to us. We have grand data, overview data, and we have granular data, smaller components of that data that accumulates to the larger data. What do I mean by the differences? Let me draw some comparisons. Grand data. A number that's called grand data would be like total traffic to your website. It's a big number. If you create markers about conversion values of all that traffic, then you're measuring how many people came to your website versus how many people did something after they came to your website. Yeah, that's what that conversion is. Doesn't mean they bought anything. It just means they did something. Unfortunately, a lot of agencies use that as a marker. Unfortunately, some agencies use the idea that they will calculate as a point of truth the traffic comes to your website versus them going to a booking engine. And that's the number that they base their entire strategy on. And as I've made this an example before, I think a week or two ago, that's like having a five door entrance to a restaurant and only counting the traffic into one door as your total revenue source. Just doesn't make sense. There's too many other revenue sources that don't work just through your website. Metasearch being the best example of that don't get counted in that process. This is where you begin to see the divisions of methods of calculations of data. When you start looking at large data sums, you're looking at the fact that you have large numbers that can be interpreted the way you want them to be interpreted. This is how much business we're driving to. Look at all these traffic numbers. It's a large number. It makes people feel good. That usually lends up to the ownership side. They like big things like that. Like, wow, look, there's 6,000 people that went to my website to the hotel yesterday. That's awesome. And they'll ignore the fact that only 1% of them actually did anything. Not necessarily buy, but did anything. Now, some owners will be like, well, great. So I had 6,000 people come to my website. What did they do? Well, 1% of them did something. Is that a good number or a bad number? Depending upon the agency answer, then you go and say, well, what kind of money did I make off of that? And that's when you get into the conversion of that 1% of activity. What did that 1% of the people do on your website? Did they buy something? And of course, then there's ways to interpret that. Is that actualized data of revenue, or is that just book data? Which is usually always the answer is booked, because you don't book in the same day all the time, every day. So bookings happen over a period of same day, multi-day, longer day. So then there comes a new metric. What's the booking window? Is this within the month, within the day for the day, within the week for the week, within the month for the month, within 30 days rolling, within 60, within 90, within 120 plus? You now have a pace program that goes along with big data. See how it begins to get smaller. And at any stage of this data, you can choose what's a relevant number to make your point. Like I said many times, is that the person who uses statistics uses it to the benefit of their point. And so they're going to pick the number that best reflects what they want to say. Reputable vendors will go over and be candid with the numbers. They'll show you why these are doing what they're doing, good or bad. Less reputable vendors, or vendors that want to just talk about how amazing they are of themselves, will only refer to numbers that make them look good. It's like a shell game. No matter what you pick, they're going to give you what they want to give you, not what you're asking for. I used to do a card trick for my sales team that involved picking a card and then putting it into a grid, basically. And by doing that, I could determine what their card was, unbeknownst to them. And so then I would lay it out in a different configuration of groups of 4, card down, whatever. But I knew where their card was. So no matter what they picked of those piles I was asking them to pick from, I made sure that where their card was the one that got left at the very end. And when I flipped over, like, woo! The idea is selective choice, directive data. I'm bringing you to where I want you to go. You may think you have free will in this. You may be asking questions you think are giving more correct answers. But in fact, I'm just guiding you to where I want to tell you the data. That's the unfortunate part of data manipulation. This now goes past the usage of data into opinion. I have an opinion that I want this number to be important to you. So I'm going to guide our conversation so that you believe it too, or that's the number that you get. I see it all too many times. It's a sad thing in that sense, because unfortunately, the people that are having to make decisions on this are not as educated about the numbers they're being handed, and they believe what they're being told. It's a confidence and trust issue. That's what vendors rely upon. It's not the product that they sell, it's the relationship they build. That's where vendors' value comes in. If you trust the vendor, then you're going to believe more of what they say before you don't believe what they say. Trust is verifiable. It should always be verifiable. That's great that you're saying that. Can you remind me again why this number is the number we've chosen? Why is this number important to me? And why not this number? What is this number over here that you're not really talking about, really saying? That requires a depth of understanding of the data. Unfortunately, just like staff members and so forth, CEOs, C-level people, exec people have limited resources of time. They have a lot more to worry about than what we're talking about today. And so for that reason, they perfunctorily keep up with it in a distanced way. They understand terminology. They understand some functionality. Some ownerships are very knowledgeable about these things. So I'm not saying that everybody's like this. There's always exceptions. It's a bell curve as to who completely knows and who doesn't know a clue. And there's some middle part into the middle. We tend to run in that range of middle part. They know enough to understand, but not enough to interpret. So for that reason, this broad data is often used for people at that level. They don't have time for the granularity, They need to understand what the data means for their interest. Are we in a positive direction, a negative direction? Are we in a growth or decline? Are we at pace? Are we being competitive? Are we hitting the goals that are in their head about financial markers, about paying notes and debt and investment returns and so forth? They have a lot of things in their head that they're worrying about. Sounds like I'm bashing ownership, but I'm not. I'm just saying in this circumstance, this isn't usually an owner's forte. So we have the tiers of those that need data at certain levels. And then we've discussed a level of data, which is grand, large number data. The other type of data, which is all cumulative to the grand data, is the granular data. The granular data runs into the realm of departmental engagements, marketing, revenue management, sales, and so forth. For marketing is campaign performance, the money's being spent versus the activity of the campaign, the conversion of the campaign, the traffic generated by each ad types to know whether or not they still continue to deliver, whether they're paused because they're not producing at the threshold KPIs that were established. That's a granular data engagement. They're looking at campaign pace and performances and conversions and traffic to determine whether they're on the right path of using this campaign and still spending money on it or pausing it. For a revenue manager, it's about yieldability. Rate yields, rate in comparison to comp set, tier placement within our comp set, rates offered in our comp set, demand to market, occupancy percentages based on occupancy that's been the goal, the forecast, budgeted as well, okay, as to where we are to those and what might be other considerations that we have to do. That symbiotic relationship between revenue management and marketing, where revenue managers have to ask well enough ahead of time and marketers have to be informed well enough ahead of time to ask the questions about what should we do about while we still can. Marketing initiatives are something we see that is not at a pace level that we were hoping for at this stage of the game. Looking at pace reports 3 days out is not helpful for a marketer. It's like running and looking at your toes at the same time. You're going to run into something or you're not going to be very successful at it. It's very hard for marketers. There are some tricks, and I say tricks because they're kind of like shock and value things. Certain platforms do allow a short window of opportunities, but there's very few of them that can impact 3-day out businesses. It's not impossible. It takes a very skilled marketer to do those things, but it's better to have 3 months out, 3 weeks out, because then you have at least some additional options of marketing to use based on the data that you're looking at. We see ourselves off in pace for certain holidays. Like right now, have been talking about Thanksgiving. We're well past the Labor Day, Halloween, season of discussions. It's not that we're ignoring them, we're not putting them to bed, and we're monitoring them and making sure that if we have to make minor adjustments, we're very much focused right now on Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's and Hanukkah and all of what happens in the latter part of the fourth quarter. Because our window of opportunity is now. For social, it's about putting content out now. For content on our site, it's about content now. Helpful guides, engagement of social, of stories, events, activities, all those things, holidays, are all things that we're building campaigns, or actually we're finalizing campaigns at this stage that we're going to be running. And for what causation? What pulls the trigger on those things? When do we offer them? What markets are we putting them into? Because we're doing the research now for where we need to market these things for the feeder markets that come to us during that time of year. If you're not that far ahead right now, you're behind. And if I'm in your market, that means I'm probably going to beat you at the market if we're at a tier level that we're competing at. That being said, this is all about data. And I know that we keep wandering around about the concept of what we're talking about with data, but to calculate potential growth with actual data, you have to look at the data in the context of what you're needing to use it for. Again, going back to ownership, they're looking at a grander, larger view. Are we riding the wave in a direction? It's like a compass. Are we going in the right direction? Are we going towards the North Star? Are we heading north? It's not so much about whether the sails are tacked correctly, that we have a following sea or a leading sea or whatever. It's just, are we going in the right direction? Captain walks out on the ship, looks around. Yes, we are. Good for me. The navigator and the helmsman are the ones going, yep, we have to correct this, so this. The navigator has to make sure that they constantly keep track of what they're doing. And the first officer has to make sure the deck is constantly adjusting the sails and so forth. I know I'm doing nautical metaphors, but they seem to help. It's regulated down as to the level of what they have to do to attain this goal. So the data for ownership has to be omnipresent. It's an overview of everything in a way that they want to understand it. At a corporate and executive level, it's about the aggregation of understanding the moving pieces of the data, the paid campaigns, the marketing in general, the social campaigns, the revenue management strategies, the rates that we're offering, the occupancy that we're still at, the group pace that we're dealing with, and so forth. They're looking at those things. Sales is looking at, are we getting our full booking for the group? Is there an attrition issue? Are we still at pace for our corporate accounts? Are they still coming in at the room counts that they are holding for? Our wholesales, our consortia, so forth. Revenue management is looking at, like, well, what's my channel contributions? Is my OTA doing too much? Am I paying too much in commissions for this? Should I be doing more meta search? Is my paid campaigns delivering at the level that I'm asking them to? What are my walk-in rates? Okay, what all the factors that go along with what they do as revenue managers to determine rate strategy and occupancy yield. And marketers, like I just said, are talking about what channels are contributing at what rates, what's their conversions, what's the total traffic, what's the productivity, is there something we should amplify, which channels work better, what's our social campaigns engagement, are they deriving attribution to our other campaigns? These are all data levels that go along with the level that they're responsible for. That's the granular data. A perfectly worked system, because I've complained already about a bad working system, a perfectly worked system is well ahead of what's happening that day, but mindful of what's happening that day. Are we at the place we thought we were going to be by forecast? Are we at the place that our budget was realistically developed for? Are we at pace and trend? Two very strong words that we have to be very mindful of now and going into 2024. It's not about benchmark metrics anymore. If you're relying solely on benchmark metrics, which are slice of times, where are we now? Boom. Is this where we thought we were? Oh, yeah, this looks fine. Yeah. That's a slice of time. The world could have caved in after you took that snapshot of your metrics the next day. But at that moment, this is what it looked like. It's not that it's not useful. It's not that you shouldn't continue with benchmark metrics. What you really need to have, because of the data availability we now have with GA4, is more about pace and trend, because you can now look at larger sums of data collectively and see more about what the data is saying than just stopping the world and looking at a moment. I remember at the time was not a dear friend in the sense of someone that I've turned to deeply respect and appreciate. My economics teacher when I went to college, Professor Oppenheimer, it's a combination of the movie, right? I used to be a thorn for him because I didn't like taking classes before 10 a.m. and it was an economics class at 8 a.m. I was persistently late. And I gave no end of grief when I did that. And he gave me no end of grief. And I turned to just appreciate him in so many ways. I always bugged the idea that every predication to an economics discussion was, if all things were constant, and they're not, we can isolate this one variable and look at it from an economic perspective. And I used to argue that if this isn't a real scenario, why are we creating it to interpret an action that we can't isolate compared to everything else that influences it? It used to drive me nuts. In a way, benchmarking is like that. We stop the world and look at everything at that time in comparison. It can be helpful because it does give us a chance to snapshot, like, oh, look, it's like a photo. That girl's spilling the water and it's going to hit the floor, and then you see these stop action videos all the time. So it can help. You can see things in benchmarking. It's not like it's not useful. It's not like it hasn't been useful. But the real value of analytics at our level now is that we can look at things with a constant influx of dynamic data, past and current, to begin to see better and use these algorithms better to see what it thinks we're going to land at for where. What is the pace and trend? And let me give you some examples of this. If you're seeing that your occupancy and your demand and your occupancy for certain dates is not where you want it to be, number one, that's your forecast. Number two, not where it should be based on where we are in time, okay? That's your pace, okay? Then you can look at the trend and say, maybe today it doesn't seem like we're at that point, but normally, here it is Friday, but let's say you get most of your bookings on Sunday. So Friday right now, our pace is behind where we thought we should be 14 days out next Saturday or the Saturday after, okay? However, we usually get most of our bookings for Saturdays on Sunday within 2 weeks. So Nothing to worry about, because this Sunday we'll know whether there's something to worry about, because that's bank for us. That's the day we expect that, even though we're behind pace now, okay, that the trend isn't there. Meaning after Sunday, we should be back to where we think, because the bookings for that day really begin to come in. If after on Monday we look at the same data and we see that we didn't get as much as we had hoped for or planned for or forecasted for, now we have a trend issue. Now pace turned into trend. Trend is we're not going to hit our number because we already passed our goal sets of what we thought would make our number up. So now we have an identifiable concern. What are our rationales for doing what we need to do? Do we need to change rate, augment rate? Do we have to change any fences we have on those dates? Like maybe we had a minimum 2-day stay, maybe we had a no check-in day before. Let's look at that. Now let's look at what it has been producing for that date. Is there a package offer that is performing differently than we anticipated? Meaning historically more or less than what it had done. Is there a pace to a rate? Is there a change in the demand to the market? Let's look at our total web traffic. Is our web traffic historically the same? Higher, lower, at? That's benchmarking, right? Boom. Is it high, above, at, or below? Okay. This is the evaluative process of actualized data. This helps you then determine if there's a course of action. Is there something we can do about it? If it's event driven, is there a means that we can amplify our communication of content and see if we can get more people to pull the trigger, so to speak, in converting with us, because we're in that prime booking window. It's only 2 weeks out of making people on the fence that are indecisive or anything. Can we make them make the decision to stay with us? Second consideration, is our competitive set doing better than us? Are we losing to somebody? Let's look at their social. Let's look at their social engagement. There's tons of tools we talk about in the podcast all the time about these tools will show you what your competitors are doing. Are they resonating better with the same clientele guests that we're looking for, same personas we're looking for? Are they cashing in better than we are with their content? And if so, what is the content that's working? Can we replicate it? Can we displace it? Is there a strength that we have, or is that just a strong suit that they have a better product and or means of conveying that product than we did, and we got caught either flat-footed or we just, in our SWOT analysis, this is not a space we can compete with. These are all the dialogues that should go along with this evaluative process of using real data. It doesn't have anything to do with that the budget that's made a year ago, this time last year, said that on August 28th or something, okay, you're supposed to have this much business, because that was an artificially created number based on the circumstances we've already whined about earlier in the show. So the idea of using real data to determine your potential growth makes these despairing differences between your budget that you've been created for versus the actualization and the forecast related to it much closer. Because now it's not about this despairing, we're down 12, 18, 22% to our budgeted numbers for this month, yet year over year we're ahead by 11 or 9%. That's crazy distances. Okay. These are unrealistic variances because unfortunately bonuses and so forth are related to the budget concept. But going back to the example we're giving about using data for growth in the circumstances that we're giving, this is the process of discussion between revenue management and marketing. Revenue management, marketing, talking about these are the triggers that we can still pull for the dates that you're talking about. We'll amp up this content on social, amplified by paid social, because organic social won't react fast enough to it. We should look at other mediums of discussion. Maybe Pinterest is a solid one, push it more into directed audience that are persona-based targeting. If you had active custom audiences developed, now called segments, you can see what segments you can create that you have had related to geographies of feeder markets and or categories of interest that you might be able to target to amplify the messaging of booking with you for that event or date or window or weekend or whatever is the value proposition of the dates of focus. And these are the conversations that happen between departments. These are the things that revenue management and marketing talk about. Sales, it might be because of a group loss. Group block didn't fill. Now, that should have been an earlier conversation. If by the contract's dates, the rooms haven't filled, always the first consideration is free selling them. Okay, if that's the case, is there an attribution clause? Do we want to enforce this? This is going to damage our long-term relationship, or is this just a one-off Smurf event and they didn't hit their block and they knew there was a penalty associated with it? We'll get that money back, but let's get the rooms released and put into general inventory. Is there a group that's going past their group block, and that's diluting our rate inventory because they've been given the permission to add 10 more rooms to their event at their negotiated rate when we could have free sold them better in transient at a third better price, and that was a known displacement value that we were willing to accept, and accept that the number's not going to land because we don't have the inventory to sell. These are the things you talk about when it comes to using real data. This is the discussions that go on for anybody that works in operations. When you're mopping the floor and you wonder why the marketing person is running by with their laptop, getting back to their office to plug in or something like this, it's like, can he not walk over the wet water? It's because there's an ultimate distraction of there's a task to be done. I'm not dismissing people. Everybody should help turn a room in banquets if they have the free time to do so. That's just teamwork. That's camaraderie. That's community. That's what you do. You don't walk by as a salesperson holding a cup of coffee because you got it from the back hall, looking at everybody busting their butt, flipping tables and chairs and stuff like this because it's a tight turn in the room, and not think you shouldn't help. Those are still the realities of everyday life. And I say salespeople on that. It can be anybody. That's not in the banquet department. Everybody should always help. And I always did that as a GM, is that everybody helps. By the same token, everybody respects the role that everybody has. It doesn't want to complain like, gee, salespeople, all they do is go to trade shows, and it's like, no, they're generating literally the top line revenue for the gas for the car that you get paid from. And as long as everyone understands everyone's role, which is such a critical element to all of that, they appreciate and respect each other because of it. It's when people don't understand another person's role or value to the organization that bias comes in and prejudice comes out of it, because they think that that person isn't carrying their fair weight, that they're doing more than them. And that creates internal community issues. It's hard to develop culture when you have that kind of fractions of perspectives. So it's always good to over communicate. Sidebar note. Anyways, so kind of actually, sidebar as it may be, it actually relates to our actual data discussion. The idea that using data to proactively look at and to accurately assess current performances is by far the most critical component to the three dimensions I talked about: property level, engagement of daily activities, those people. It is critically important, but in an overview sense, to the secondary tier, which is your corporate entity, your management company. Okay. And it's not so critical for the third entity, which is your C-level and your ownership groups, because they don't need to know how the sausage is made, so to speak. They just enjoy buying sausage. That being said, all of that work being done with this kind of granular data literally accumulates to using KPI metrics that should be understood and used by the ownership and C-level people. They may not need to know how to calculate the things at the granularity that they're generating, but they certainly should know how they contribute to the numbers that they look at. Getting them off of vanity metrics like total volume or traffic from website to booking engine stuff, getting them into more realistic numbers of these are the metrics that are used to determine the metrics you should be paying attention to. Now, it's easy to talk to an owner about RevPAR, revenue per available room. Some of them are even more rambunctious and go into GoPower and all this other stuff. And what was the total revenue count for the food and beverage department, and so forth and so on. They can understand gross revenue numbers. They talk in dollars. That's their world. But interpreting how those dollars are calculated or generated should be in KPIs, key performance indicators, that are already adopted and used by all of the metrics at the granular level, so that the transference of those KPIs into the numbers that make the most sense to ownership are used in symbiotic relationship. They're the same build that creates the larger perspective for ownership. What do I mean by that? Ownership needs to understand where its money's coming from, not just a brush stroke of the doors are open and there's people walking around and payrolls being expended and so forth. They need to understand the business cycles of the hotel, more so than just the reports of daily revenue or monthly revenue. They need to understand what influenced that revenue: events, holidays, business cycle. They have some, and usually a very good sense of what is a business cycle. I'm not denoting, again, negativity to ownerships and C-level people, but they have multiple hotels to look at. Even to just imagine getting past 5 hotels to understand how each of the 5, if they're located in 5 different locations, have business cycles. That's 5. It's 5 different children you're keeping track of at the same time. Now multiply that to 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. You see the metrics get harder to understand beyond a certain level. This is not a detriment to ownership and C-level people that they can't keep up with those individual properties. It's the fact that that is unreasonable. Their day would be spent just monitoring what we're telling them without actually doing the job that they're in the role of. So you can't fault for that. You can be mad at it, and you can certainly go over and grumble about, overviews of budgets and so forth. But if they truly embrace the fact that the numbers they're being given from their team and from their vendors that they trust and validate that trust with are giving them numbers that make sense to them, that they don't always have to question those numbers. They understand where they come from. They understand why they're used as a metric, and they understand what the metric means. Get that done for an ownership and C-level, and you have succeeded in creating a successfully positive business, because that will go downwards faster than it will ever come upwards. Because that descendance of value then goes right into the management teams, goes right into the operations people for it, goes right into the property level people and the department people for it, because everybody's thinking the same thing. They're looking at it at the level that they need to, but they understand what this number is being used for. And because of that, they become they're part of the community, the culture in the community, that this is where they're driving to. This is the goal, the KPI. And it's not always a dollar number. It's hard for somebody that's cleaning toilets and making beds and painting walls and greeting grumpy guests and so forth to really be worried about a affluent person's larger bank account. That's not what they're worried about. They're worried about theirs. But the idea is that by helping what the business is striving for helps themselves, that's a goal that's worth attaining. That's on actual data. So the importance of taking a KPI and understanding KPIs and presenting it at the levels that it needs to be understood is a key component to using real data, actual data. So I don't want to grind hard on it. I really wanted to make these points. These are critical elements to be considered when you're doing the budgeting process. Now, you're in the process of aggregation of data. Usually, and we've talked about this before, time sequences goes, August is the aggregation of data, the assimilation of top-line revenue expectations, the ability to look at historically, forensically, the data that we have, where we're getting it from, basically putting your stuff in order, stacks of stuff that you are going to be using next month, end of now, this month into next month, putting together how we're going to jigsaw puzzle the expectations of revenue. And then next month, we'll be going to the verification, validation of expenses, validation of revenue expectations, all the breakdowns that are associated with now that we have the top line revenue calculated. Okay, now how is this going to break down and flow through? And then that goes into our proposition of what their budgeting process will go for approval come around October. That's the general timeline for all this. So there you have it. Our topic was, of course, calculating potential growth with actual data. My rant and rave is about the usage of real data and not opinion. Keep it in science, so to speak. And the idea that active communication at the levels that you need the data is critical, as well as consensus of how the data is used as it goes up and reported, as well as going down and valued. Should write that down in a book someday. Anyways, thank you all for watching us. If you're watching us on TV and staring at my face in the background, we will, I promise you, change my background as time goes on. Being now at a standing desk means that you get to see more of the upper with the lights and so forth. So that looks like the gulag. And of course, we're still trying to get furniture to replace the ones that we lost during the hurricane. And I know it's been 10 months ago, but so many other people are far worse off still than us in that sense. But we'll get to a more appeasing decorum in the back as time goes on. We are, and now rolling in officially, being this the case, into our 10th year of doing this show live every week, no matter where we are in the world. So no small chronic achievement. We're now in our 10th year of doing this. And that's cool. That's neat to be able to say that we've never, ever missed a live show every week for now going into our 10th year. And same too with the podcast. Even the podcast has been going on for 17 years. The past 10 years have been weekly as well. So it's kind of neat to say that we have the content. We are going to be putting a lot of different content together in different ways. You'll see more of that. For those that want to keep in communication, I always take content feedback. You can email me directly at lauren@hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com. You can audibly respond to me at hdm.news/talkback. That we always ask a question of the week, see what people's comments are. And then also you can record your audio and then tell me if I can quote you, refer to you, or actually put your audio on. We do that in the podcast from time to time. And as always, if you're watching us on TV, whether it's your Roku TV, your Samsung TV, your Apple TV, your Google TV, your Amazon, Google, missing one, Roku, Samsung, Apple, Google, Amazon, Google. I think I had them all. Anyways, thank you for looking at my face the whole time, if you were. And if you're watching us or listening to us, watching us and listening to us on any simulcast, we're on multiple Facebook pages, broadcasting, multiple Twitter platforms, now X, broadcasting, multiple YouTube channels, broadcasting, one LinkedIn. That's my profile one because the LinkedIn only allows for one. We're even on Twitch. If you use your gaming console for content, we're on there. We broadcast on Twitch. I'm trying to think if we miss any of the other ones. Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube. No, I think we got all of those. And of course, if you want to watch this show and any of our previous 418 shows, you can go to hospitalitychannel.tv. That's our I Love Lucy rerun website. That and all of our podcasts are all there. We do run a separate radio station for the Hospitality Podcast. In addition to being on podcast platforms, we are on 39 different platforms for our podcast. Thank you for everyone that watches us around the world. We translate that, subtitles, in 11 languages, the top 11 languages. We shift it from time to time depending upon which languages pop up as being the top 10, because 11th language is obviously English, which we start with. But we add 10 more translations to it because gosh knows I talk fast enough. Our podcast, as I keep mentioning, happens after this live show. It is an audio podcast. So a lot shorter, but more specific to tools and the techniques of using the tools, usually related to our topic of conversation today. So our podcast today will be about data reporting tools and how better to define their usage. So we'll talk specifically about tools. Most of them are free. Most of the time, the other times they're mostly on discount on platforms. We talk about where to get those, AppSumo, places like that. And if you do have to pay them for them, at least there's a free trial. Usually we refer to that you can try. We don't get anything off it. It's about us just using tools and being helpful in the process of it. So you can listen to our podcast and go through that as well. I'm going to cover a little bit of news items as well. So thank you for everyone. We broadcast in 209 countries with this on TV. So thank you for that. We do have a hospitality channel, obviously, that we broadcast on the TV. So if you want to join our group on the hospitality channel, just look for it on your Roku or Samsung or Amazon or Apple or whatever, like I just mentioned, Google, and look for hospitality channel. You'll see us there. Live show is always on the free side. And we do have a hospitality peer group, a group of hospitality marketers. If you do what we do and you want a peer group of people that you can have intelligent conversation with, that you're not there to learn what hospitality marketing is. You're doing hospitality marketing. You want to learn better how to do it. It's a peer group of professionals. You can go to hospitalitymarketing.club. Put your email in. I send you a quiz. If you pass the quiz, which shows proficiency, we send you an invite to the closed social group. It's not on Facebook. It's this closed group that's on our platform so that it stays within our system. Well, enough of the self-pitching. My name is Lauren Gray. I thank you for the privilege of your time and look forward to talking to you all next week.